Stop making these 5 common mistakes and you'll have a better looking garden. Your plants will be healthier and you'll do a lot less work. Stop killing your trees. Lots of people build mulch volcanoes. They pile the mulch up around the trunk, and that's bad for the trunk. It gets too wet next to the trunk and you get fungal infection. In this case, I have a soil volcano. The owner of this home has been piling up soil here for a number of years, and it's damaged the roof. In a separate video, I'm going to remove the soil here and have a close look at the damage. But for now, the rule is simple. Don't pile anything against your tree. Keep the soil away. Use mulch. Mulch is great here, but keep it a couple inches away from the trunk. From where you're standing, this looks like a great cedar hedge, but there's a real problem here. Now, before I get into that, let's talk about cedars. Around here, we call this a cedar, but in fact, it's not. It should be called an arborvitae, or the genus name is Thuja. But a lot of people call these cedars, or white cedars, or eastern cedars. They're a great tree when you plant them in the right spot, and they're a real problem if you site them incorrectly. This tree's been here a number of years, but now it's getting brown edges. If you have a close look in here, it's dying off. In fact, the other side of this is even worse. There's 2 problems here. One is that it's getting too much shade. When it was planted, this tree in front was just a small sapling, and it was getting lots of light, and so it grew well. But over the years, the tree got bigger. Surprise, surprise, trees grow. As that tree got bigger, there was less light coming into this one. This is going brown now, but even worse, the backside is pretty much dead, and it's time to take this tree out. The second problem here is that it's planted at the top of a hill. If we look down the side of the house, you'll see the slope. These trees need lots of moisture. It's doing all right here because it has an irrigation system. But as we go down the slope where there's more water, we'll see they do even better. Let's go have a look. We're now at the back of the property, and we've got a similar cedar hedge here. It's going brown too, but it's not as bad as the one at the top of the hill. And the reason is water. Because we're on a slope here, the water comes down here, and this area is wetter than the area at the top of the hill. Remember, cedars love moisture. Now, if we go down the hill some more, I'll show you another set of cedars. The cedars behind me are doing really well. They're at the bottom of the hill, and they get lots of moisture. Right behind them is a swampy area, and you can see the cattails growing there. That's an indication of plenty of moisture. Not only that, but these cedars down here are getting lots of light. The ones on the side of the house here are shaded and they're dry. Why do we keep trying to grow plants in the wrong spot? They don't do well, you're not going to be happy, and it's just a waste of time and money. Put a plant in the right spot. In the spot up here, instead of cedar, it would have been better to use false cypress or chamaecyparis. They look very similar, but they don't need the moisture. And they can also take some shade. Stop growing plants in the wrong spot. You're better off growing something else rather than your favorite plant. Match the plant to the growing condition. And remember, nearby trees are going to grow, so think about the shade condition in 10-15 years from now, not just today. Mistake number 3, and I see this all the time. People have beds near walkways or grassy areas, and for some crazy reason, they want to build up the soil here. So the soil here is higher than the sidewalk. That doesn't make any sense. In this case, the owner has lined it with some plastic edging to keep the soil in place, but this stuff looks ugly. Don't put it in your landscape. But more importantly, it's really hard to water this because the soil keeps washing down onto the sidewalk. When you're making a flower bed next to a pathway or your lawn, the soil level in the garden should be lower than the pathway. That way, soil won't run into your pathway. Now, a few feet back, it can be a little higher and slope gently down, but this area right here should have soil below the pathway. This side of the pathway has the same problem. Now it's a little garden, but the soil here is higher than here. So every time you water this, the soil runs out onto here and you have a big mess. You either leave that and it looks ugly, or you come along and you clean it up, which is too much work. This bed needs to be below the pathway. Mistake number 4, and again, this is a very common one. We have a nice bed of rocks here, except for one problem. There's this black stuff sticking out. This is weed barrier. Now it's put down to stop the weeds. The product is sold as a weed barrier. It must stop weeds. Well, there's 2 big problems with weed barrier. One, it doesn't stop weeds. Now, new gardeners like it because for the first year or 2 it looks great, and landscapers like it for the same reason. Experienced gardeners hate this stuff. After a couple years, dirt and plant debris settle in the rocks, and that's a great seed bed. So you start getting weeds. It's always full of weeds here. Tree roots grow up into it, and that's not good for the trees. It also reduces the amount of moisture that gets into the ground to those tree roots. But most important, it always sticks up and looks so frickin' ugly. There is really no use for weed barrier in the garden. Just keep it out of the garden. If you use it, you'll be fine for a couple years. 3-4 years into your garden, you'll learn to hate it, and then it's a big job to remove. Don't use weed barrier. Here's a shrub that looks kind of interesting. The inside has been kept very open, and there's leaves at the top here, and it looks okay. But when I had a closer look, I realized that this is a lilac. Now, I don't have a problem with the pruning technique here, but it's situated in a completely wrong part of the garden. I'm facing east here, and right behind the camera is a large silver maple. What does that mean? It means this plant gets virtually no light. It gets an hour very early in the morning, and then it's shade for the rest of the day. The reason this lilac has few leaves is it has no sun. And I had a close look at it. It didn't flower this year, and it has developed no buds on it. It's fall, and you should clearly see the buds now. No flowers next year either. Now there's another lilac right here. Now this is a Korean lilac, so the leaves are smaller. It's also situated on the same side of the house. It's far too shady for the plant. But the real reason this one isn't flowering is that someone's been clipping it. Now it's got a bit of growth from this year, but it looks as if early in the spring someone clipped it into a round ball. Even if this was in a sunny location, this kind of clipping would keep you from getting flowers. Flowering plants like lilacs don't do well clipped. Now I know you're not going to keep making these mistakes in your garden, and that will make you a better gardener. But there are a lot of other secrets to garden design that you should know. Many of them are very easy to implement, and it'll make you such a better gardener. To show you those design secrets, I've put together a video and you can get to it right now.